Carrie Lucas, Managing Director, Independent Women's Voice. Who'd have thunk it that what you do with your own house, I guess short of having a firing range or making moonshine, would turn out to be intergalactic news and the subject of something that has to stop things in our legislature. Carrie, good morning. Great to have you with us. What do you think
here? Good morning. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
I'm just curious. The short-term rentals could turn our communities into commercial zones, and that's by Sabrina Schaeffer, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, not one of the newspapers that I'm terribly familiar with. But what do you make of that?
And she's also the executive director of the Independent Women's Forum, too. Sabrina is.
Yeah. Sabrina is my great colleague and partner here. But, this is such an interesting issue because on one hand, I think it's such a fabulous development that we have all these new options, both for people who are looking for places to stay at cities or busy times, who want to take family someplace and are looking more for a home environment than a traditional hotel. And then for people who want to make money on the side by being able to rent out their house or apartment, there's a lot of great things about having these new options. But I think it's really important we also talk a little bit about some of the downsides and how this can impact other people's property rights, and the need to kind of try to find a balance and give people truly more options, which is including the option to live someplace where there isn't a de facto hotel next to them. So this really is, I think it's a fascinating issue. It's more complicated than just saying, this is great. This is, we want to make sure this can happen anywhere and everywhere. There is a lot of upsides. We need to think through the downsides to make sure that other people's interests are protected.
Down in there someplace is a legal question, which I wish was at the top of the list. It is, after all, my house. Now, there are zoning regulations. I get that. We all understand. Like I said, you can't put up a bowling alley or a filling station or a firing range or sell moonshine. Those are things that are all regulated. But it's still your house. And what I see so far is an awful lot of folks that are going, oh, my God, what if? But they don't have any evidence to go with the what if. I've not seen what we used to call in law school the parade of the horribles, as to all these sweet little 4-year-olds that got raped and kidnapped and drug off to be sold to the circus. I don't hear any of that.
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't know of places where there have been horror stories. You do hear things about things like parking problems, that if you're on a small residential street and instead of having, your one car in the driveway, if all of a sudden you have a couple of rental cars, it can become a problem. And, and there, as you're talking about the ways that people restrict their property rights and what you can do in your home, it actually goes far beyond just saying, hey, you can't have a business here, you can't have a commercial enterprise. There's a lot of communities that say, you know what, you can't paint your house this color, and you've got to have these real regulations on what you can do with your house. And I think that's the kind of thing when you decide to move someplace. Some people say, hey, that's crazy. But if everybody wants their houses to look a certain way, then it's not crazy to have a community that sets standards. And I certainly don't think, I've got 5 kids, I've just recently I moved homes just last summer. And we certainly looked around at or considered the street that we were on, the kind of neighbors that we would have, how those homes were being used. And I definitely would be concerned if my next door neighbor started running an Airbnb where there was a different folks coming in every night. That's a completely different vibe. And do I want to have my 5-year-old daughter, next to a place where they're having, a bunch of parties, or somebody moving in all the time who has no interest in the long-term safety and security of the neighborhood? It sounds
to me like, though, Carrie, it's more a matter of people who live on the west and north sides of Indianapolis in advance of the 500, which brings 500,000 people or more to town. Manage to get in a couple of nights here or there, like they get for using their front yards for parking on race day. It's not one of those things I've not heard about people buying a house at 10th and Vine, and then they just turn it into a little miniature hotel, and there's somebody different in it every night. That's gonna.
Yeah, and that may be absolutely true in Indianapolis, and it may be that everybody in Indianapolis decides we are absolutely fine. And I think that I agree when it comes to something like the Indy 500. If I were living in a neighborhood, I would want my community or my neighborhood to say, hey, we make these exceptions, or here's these rules that you could do surrounding that. But I think the larger issue is, I think it's fabulous if people live in a city where they think it's not a problem and they want to allow Airbnb.
There's also one more piece to this that's the law getting in the way, and that is zoning. If your property is zoned residential, that means you can't have a commercial operation on your property, irrespective of whether you think it's a good idea or not. And the neighborhoods you're talking about are all zoned commercial. All zoned residential. And that is its own impedance to the idea of being able to rent out your house. We'll be right back. Stick around. Back to work, my friends. Terry Lucas, the guest of the Garrison Show, managing director of the Independent Women's Voice, and managing director, I believe it is, of the Independent Women's Forum. Todd's got a question for you, Carrie.
Well, it's not a question. It's where we are with what's going on over at the Indiana House. Yesterday, and I kind of gave you a heads up on this off air, Carrie, regarding protecting Airbnb, and that's really kind of what we're talking about here is Airbnb. And I let you know that Carmel had banned Airbnb basically. Yesterday, the vote was 50-46, and that was a failure to advance a proposal that would have banned local governments from regulating short-term rentals like Airbnb. And it's probably going to die. I don't see that happen because tomorrow's last day over there. They're going to sign off there. But what do you make of the state versus the local municipalities in this whole thing?
Yeah, it's funny because I guess I'm beyond a federalist in this circumstance because I really think that it should be up to localities to make decisions about their zoning laws and how property can be used. And if you do have different neighborhoods that set in different little towns that set different rules, then people are going to be able to vote with their feet. And if you want to, obviously it takes a lot to move or relocate, but at least you have options. I kind of dislike this idea that we have to set a one size fits all where every single place has to accept the concept of short-term rentals. And I do think we need to be careful and start, we are in kind of new and uncharted territories, and to be careful about defining what it is we're talking about. Because, I think that we all understand the idea if you own your house and you end up going, on military duty or something like that away for 6 months and are going to sublet it for that time to somebody who's going to come in and take over your home. That's a really different situation. I think that's a different circumstance than what I think is raising some concerns when it is the nightly rentals where it is just having the equivalent of a.
I think we lost her, Todd.
We need to talk this thing out.
We lost you temporarily.
Give me that
Carrie.
last sentence again, Carrie, because we lost you just for about 2-3 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. Yeah, just that there's we really need to get to get some definitions out there because we are in a new kind of in a new circumstance. And some of these things are very different. Renting a house for a couple of months is very different than renting it for having a different person in there every night. So I want there to be people to be able to work out and find what makes sense for different neighborhoods and recognize that people are going to have a lot of different preferences when it comes to allowing this type of thing.
It's interesting that 20 Republicans voted no on this thing to help defeat it yesterday. So this was a bipartisan effort because here there are supermajorities in both the House and the Senate, Carrie, favoring the Republican Party.
Yeah. Well, so I think this isn't a clear partisan issue in many ways. There are kind of competing interests. It's shades of gray. I think everybody, a lot of us are really excited about this kind of. It's on one hand a great thing, innovation, people, a new kind of way to earn money. There's a lot of upsides. But again, we just have to balance things out. I think a lot of times they kind of pit this as the hotel industry, kind of traditional hotels against Airbnb. And I think that's kind of a shame to look at it that way because, yes, there certainly are a lot of money at stake and competing interests. There's a lot of other players in this, including, neighbors and neighborhoods and this concept of having residential neighborhoods, giving people different options to live in the kind of communities they want. I wish that the hotel industry, which has a lot of grievances, legitimate complaints that they are held to these really high standards, could also start saying, hey, we want to look for some, loosening of some of these restrictions. We want to be able to offer different kinds of experiences to people too, instead of having the often stringent requirements that they have. So it's time to have a big conversation about really the service economy, which is what this is.
Well, it's interesting. You just tweaked me again. I think about whether the state government needs to do this. Then I think about, well, does the municipality have a dog in this fight? If you get libertarian for a second, you go, wait a minute, this is my damn house. And I guess
Sure.
I go back to my first wrench in the works for a second. What's the evidence that it's a bad idea? The only evidence I've seen so far is that somebody's pursed off because he's not got his fingers in the pie.
Oh, I don't think that's true. I think there's definitely a lot of people who are living in apartment buildings where all of a sudden it turns from being, a condominium to having somebody, constant new people in and parking problems or problems.
Aside from that, though, are people getting hurt? Are people losing their property? Are folks coming in there and stealing their car or messing with their children? And I don't mean that it didn't happen, but I've not heard any of that so far myself.
Yeah, but I do think that there is a quality of life issue. I mean, it is. I don't think that. Yes, I mean, obviously, it'd be horrible, and if we start hearing stories about thieves coming in and stealing from their neighbors or committing violent acts, then that would of course be of concern. But I think it is even a concern if it's all of a sudden you thought you lived in an apartment building with a few families and you knew who they were and you could feel secure, or there was not going to be noise after 11.
That's pretty tight. That's tight quarters. Yeah. I see that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it's not. It doesn't have to be like a huge crime spree to also be something where it's worth kind of thinking through.
Changes what you thought you were getting in your bargain. Okay, very quickly because we've only got 2 minutes here. Hadley Manning, who's a frequent guest of ours, should Medicaid be converted to a block grant program? And she sets out some of the big numbers here as to what's happened since 1966 when it was $1 billion to today when it's $388 billion or some number like that. Medicaid's a sore subject. It's become a backbone of medical treatment for the indigent and the elderly. A block grant does what? Give us the civics lesson in about a 30-second definition and tell us what you think about that.
Yeah, I think Medicaid has such an important role to play, but it has so many problems right now, and those problems vary by state. Right now, too many people have Medicaid insurance but still can't get access to medical care, and we need to give states the freedom to find ways to solve that problem, to create a better program. So it's all for turning this into a block grant instead of having the federal kind of one-size-fits-all approach to Medicaid. This would help in terms of the budget, but more importantly in terms of the care that people receive who are on Medicaid.
Well, the idea is to take care of those that can't take care of themselves. The idea was not at the beginning to bend over every physician and other healthcare provider in the world so that they had to essentially work for free or end up paying money. I mean, there's some pretty bad scheduling payment schedules that make it so that they have to stay busy doing something else because they don't make anything. They end up losing money on the Medicaid patients, and that's a scary thing.
Absolutely, and ultimately that comes back and harms the Medicaid patients themselves. There's tremendous parts of the country where someone with Medicaid, cannot find somebody who's willing to take their insurance.
Yeah.
That's useless. That means that this program is absolutely failing. The numbers on outcomes and of those on Medicaid are horrifying. They're shameful. A lot of people with Medicaid have worse health outcomes than people who have no insurance at all. We can do better than that. There's a lot of money being spent on this program. We need to find ways to make sure that it's helping those in need, that we're not encouraging people who could buy insurance on their own to instead opt into Medicaid, and really focus on getting Medicaid into a program that helps those
and
who
I
need it
think
and
you got
provides
to
real
reinstitute
quality
some competition and the like there. Carrie Lucas, thank you so much for your work as always. God bless you guys. We're back in a mere moment.